Hi, I'm Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center in downtown Indianapolis, and I am delighted to have my friend Ernest Disney-Britton, Vice President, I want to get this exactly right, Vice President for Community Impact and Investment for the Arts Council of Indianapolis. Before you say anything, Ernest, I just want to say you and Julie and the team at ACI have done a marvelous job of stewarding the arts leadership of this city through this extraordinary event that I'm hoping will be a once in a lifetime thing. But I really thank you all down there for what you're doing at the Arts Council to help guide us through this.
Well, thank you very much. This has been the opportunity for us to really, in a very personal and impactful way, support the work that you and the other arts leaders are doing. That when we were faced with the shutdown in March, all of us were wondering, what do we do next? But one of the values that we hold up is that we need to make sure that our stakeholders, our partners are safe, and that we need to figure out first and foremost how we're going to protect the sector, protect our partners, because we are here to support you. And at the time, we had no idea what in the world that meant.
Nope.
Just the standpoint that when you looked at the fact that lost income was happening, then that told us that investing in income was going to be the priority for individual artists as well as for arts organizations.
Well, thank you for really everything you're doing and everything you've just described. And hopefully over our next hour or so together, we'll be able to drill down on a lot of those things you just mentioned. I always like to begin these interviews usually with kind of how you're doing, what this year has been for you personally, what it has been for you as an administrator, and where you are now. So what has been for you?
Yeah, and certainly at different times of the day and different times of the week, I reflect back on the last year and I think about how am I doing right now? And I have different reactions. I can tell you that today, I'm feeling excited that 2020 is going to be over soon.
I think a lot of us should.
Yes, and that while it is not completely rosy, just on the other side of December 31st, but at least we can see light at the end of the tunnel for the first time since March. There is I sometimes say, little flippantly, but sometimes it's truthfully, that I'm fine, and I am just grateful. Grateful that I'm not sick, haven't gotten sick, and that I'm not in the hospital. The losses of people that have happened this year. There have been people in my own life, my own family, that I've lost this past year. There have been friends and colleagues. We know Brian Fonseca being one from the local theater community that we know and love and miss. And so it is, all of that weighs heavily on me every single day, but it also fosters this energy that what can we do to help advance, and so that those memories are not lost, but that everything is better when we turn the corner.
Well, that's lovely, Ernest. I feel the same way. I feel like one of the few blessings of the year for me and for a lot of my colleagues, both in the theater world and then in the broader arts world, this idea of taking stock of blessings, and one of the few blessings has been this time to reflect on what has been and letting go and maybe actively tearing down old structures that really weren't healthy for us.
Incredible to hear. You know, one of the big lessons for me that relates exactly to that is that we've learned how to be resilient. We've learned that we didn't have to rely on the old structures in order to move forward. Yes, we still need to count on our friends and our patrons, but we also learned that it wasn't always the balance sheet that made all the difference in the world. That we had to, as part of this process, prioritize people first in terms of safety. So we had to focus on safety, and we, in a way that we never had to before. In fact, it was always one of those things that, well, we have to do that because it's sort of the right thing. But now it's a life-saving thing that we had to do, and that causes us to have a whole new frame that, well, it was always important, and we need to approach things in the same way. I've also been struck by the organizations that talk about, and you've just hit on part of that, is that resilience is about the history of the organization and the foundation that they built up. It's not about the walls and structures and things like or endowment size and all of those things. Those things are incredibly important, but those aren't really the true indicators of resilience that we're seeing amongst a lot of organizations, particularly small and mid-sized and performing arts organizations, that it is people that are the true sign of resilience in terms of the performing arts. And that's exciting. My background is theater. And so having come up in the theater management program at Eastern Michigan University, but the point is that we're starting to measure resilience in a different way. And the ability to sort of innovate, and the opportunity to bring our board into more engagement in the organizations like yours, who I would estimate, and we haven't done a true measure, but based on conversations, boards have been more engaged than ever before in this process.
I would say this is the best board of directors with whom I've worked. And I've been an arts administrator in Indianapolis. It will be it's 27 and a half years. And I came to town to work for the Civic Theater when it was at the art. Well, actually, that doesn't really matter. But the only other board I have to compare this to would be the Art Center board in the mid '90s when Joyce Summers was running the Indianapolis. That board was so tight, and they were all in it. And I say this in the best way: in it to win it. They were not daunted by challenges. We pivoted as necessary, and the idea of grooming officers for the board was all part of their process, recruitment, and then how you retain like your immediate past board chair in the executive committee structure, so that there's this arc of continuity. And the Phoenix board is actually about to adopt a similar process, but they have been really, really tight for the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, but this year has been critical. And they have, the attendance figures are these Zoom board meetings are phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that what we found is that board members are more than just showing up to vote on whatever the new financials are, or even to fundraise, that they're actually important problem solvers. We all knew that in the past, but I think during the pandemic, they've been a critical part of the resilience, because they have been part of the brainstorming and the scenario planning, and they've been deeply engaged. And I think board members as individuals, and I'm on a board of an organization, that we know the organizations better than we did because of the pandemic. So that's another one of the blessings, as you were talking about before.
Yeah.
So it's people, including the board members, and a greater appreciation for the safety and mental health of the artists and staff people that we work with.
That's really fascinating. That's really fascinating. So jumping back just a little bit to what you were saying about how you measure, I guess, resiliency, and you're talking about in terms of people, maybe explain that just a little bit further, because I do think, I certainly have endowment envy. I look at, what I know about the
Right.
Indiana Repertory Theater's endowment, what I know about Newfield's endowment, and I can't help but have that kind of envy, because we do have debt on the Phoenix facility from our construction. So I think of that in terms of like having financial resilience. So expand a little bit on how you describe resilience, or how you're thinking.
I do think that in the past, we were in a rut, I would say now, that the only way to measure resiliency is how much cash is in the bank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what we found through the pandemic, that it's not just about cash in the bank, although cash in the bank is important, particularly for the long term. But when you're in the middle of a pandemic, what is most important is people. That people have a passion for what you're doing, and people who are willing to make a sacrifice to help along the way. About so many of our organizations in Indianapolis are small, mid-sized organizations that are in many ways doing without. But when you think in terms of even organizations that have larger budgets, that over $1 million, those organizations who are taking leaders who are taking budget costs, they're not. It's not that we're not making the decisions that we need to for our business operations, but that we're prioritizing things like history and longevity. The fact that an organization has been around for decades says a lot about resiliency.
Oh, that's
And
true.
so one of the things that we looked at the beginning was uh, organizations in terms of their time on this planet or in this city and active in this community. And that is one of the big signs of resiliency is, well, how long have I been around? It's less about how much money is in the bank, but how long have I been around? Now, that's only for the period of this year. Uh, you have to have money for that longer run. If we go 2 years, 3 years in that same pace, the factors for resiliency might change. Another criteria is that we've noticed. So we haven't started to officially measure this in some way, but these are the trends that we've noticed in terms of resiliency. Is that board member engagement? Are the board members still showing up? Have they given up? Have they said this is beyond me, and I don't know how to engage in this way? But instead, what we're seeing is that board members are more engaged than ever. That's another sign of resiliency. And then that volunteers are still looking for ways to engage and support. Our volunteers I was talking to a volunteer group that does a lot of work with your organization and other theater companies and music companies and other events around the city. They're still hungry to volunteer and to be ushers and to be hosts. And they're watching the arts community very closely because they want to be involved. And so the resiliency that we're seeing is people. And there's also board members are giving more than ever before. There are the numbers pieces, but what has most impressed and inspired me is how we're leveraging people and how more deeply engaged people have become and not despaired. Yes, there was a point where we don't know what we're doing, but instead of just climbing into a hole and saying, well, I'm not going to do anything, everybody redoubled their efforts. And they figured out all the possible scenarios and started working through whatever was the best.
Oh, that's really encouraging to hear, Ernest. I do feel like with at least the conversations in April and May, I'm like, oh my God, I think we can hang on, 90 days or 120 days. And then it's like now we're like thinking, the Phoenix is thinking in terms of quarterly chunks now. But I do feel, while like you, there are days where I think I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. And then there are days like today, my conversation with you, and prior to this, Delia Robertson, our managing director, and I presented our reopening plans for the outdoor spaces to our colleagues in the National New Play Network. And it's just so lovely to be able to have really honest conversations about so many things that that contemporary theater, professional contemporary theater, is facing. So it's not just how long are our theaters closed, it's how do we really drill down on equity, diversity, and inclusion. In the Phoenix Theater's case, we've added accessibility to that list. And not just, have these statements, but actually have measurable goals and objectives over the next 2 years and then over the next 5 years. It's just really inspiring what you're saying to me, is that we are figuring out a way, and we're still figuring it out, and we probably will be figuring it out maybe all the way through 2021, but we're coming back to something healthier, right? Isn't that what you
We
feel?
really feel like that. I personally feel that it's going to be a healthier fall of 2021 than what we experienced in the past. Now, that doesn't mean that the finances will all be there and everyone will be as ready to go into theaters and others as we're hoping. But it does mean that I think we'll be better as a community. We've seen that arts organizations are working together and interested in collaborating,
Yes.
and not just saying that, oh, okay, well, you can use this space. No, it's been about, for the last 9 months, it's been about co-creating. It's been about co-creating your space that you've talked about, that you all will be opening across the street and the outdoor venue. It's about co-creating that space. You have done that in collaboration and co-creation with others based on needs of the sector. The whole process has made all the opportunities for collaboration far more visible and transparent than I think that what we've experienced in the past. And it's also gotten us out of our silos. Yes, we all, I know we're on Zoom and therefore we should say that we like being on Zoom. But the advantage of Zoom is that we're able to talk to each other without the impediments of travel.
Yes.
Which sort of reduces the amount of time that we can share with each other. But we can also involve more people in that conversation. I've been absolutely fascinated by all of the work that has been happening in terms of the virtual.
Yes.
Everyone hated Zoom, hated the idea that we would have to do theater and music concerts and even tour the museums virtually. What we found is that, you know what, our audience is bigger than what we ever imagined that it could be. And some groups have found also that their attendance for their youth programs and things have been higher in terms of the actual participation rate than ever before. That doesn't take anything away from the incredible experience of actually being inside the Phoenix Theater, but it's a plus. It's an added impact, and we have an incredible opportunity. When I think in terms of better than ever in the fall and next winter, is that we've created a hybrid for the art sector nationally, but I'm most close to watching what's happening here in Indianapolis. And this hybrid is going to take us out of the dark ages in terms of this is what we've always done, and therefore we're going to do it that way, to we're going to take the best of what we used to do that had the biggest impact, and we're also going to take advantage of all these new learnings that we've had in terms of virtual and expanding access and being more equitable and making a bigger impact in the community. So that's what gets me very excited about what's ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are, Ernest. And that's, it has gotten us out of speaking, from my experience of the Phoenix, it's gotten us out of this silo. Exactly. And it isn't that I think we created this silo to keep people away. It's just this need to produce, this need to create programs, need to be in the building to host all this stuff. And when that stopped, it allowed me a lot. I mean, we were still extraordinarily busy, like everybody, pivoting through the first 3 months and the first 6 months. But the last 3 months have really been about talking to colleagues. And I've had some great conversations, and they haven't even been about the art. I had one with Keisha Dixon about 2 months ago, and I called her, and I thought I was calling the office because that's the number was there, and it was her cell number, and it was like 6:30 on a Tuesday. I'm like, Keisha, I'm so sorry. I thought this was out. She goes, now it's my cell, and I said, well, you sound great, and I feel terrible I bothered you, and she goes, that's because I just had my knee redone or my hip or whatever. And
That's right.
Because, I told her, I go, well, I said, the last couple of times I'd seen you, you've seen a little grouchy. She goes, that's because my knee
Of pain.
And we had this lovely conversation that wasn't even about the work. And then when we have had a conversation with Deborah Asante and Bob Lehman from our staff, then it has been about the work. But getting to know, Keisha better outside of the work, then when we started having conversations about the work, we can get right to the work, and it can be this, really open conversation about what are you bringing to the table in terms of what's the Phoenix bringing besides just the venue. And, they have a tentative dates now on our calendar for this outdoor space in June. And I just don't think that would have ever happened had the pandemic not happened, because we wouldn't probably have this outdoor stage in the plans, at least not this quickly.
Right.
So I'd really, again, it's the blessings of this pandemic to say you have to stop doing that. And now what are you going to do with your, quote unquote extra time?
Right. And I'll say that one of the things that I hear in the sort of BIPOC arts cohorts is that in the past, and when we go back many months, March and April, one of the things that we would hear is that there weren't conversations, that there was not it seemed as if there were white arts leaders who were talking to each other, but there were not white arts leaders who were really having relationship-based conversations with BIPOC led and serving organizations. And that this time where we're not having to be in the production mode has really allowed those things that people may have always wanted to do, but so many more of those conversations are happening. And that's another one of the good signs of this time. Again, it's focused on people, and those are the people who create the art. And
Yeah.
so that is taking care of each other has been a big, wonderful hug from this awful pandemic.
Yeah, it has been this year for me, and in many ways as an arts administrator, has been an extraordinary gift. One of the things that I hadn't realized, and to my wife was telling me, because she works for ARP and has worked for that organization for many years, but I was talking to her about a relationship I developed with, professional relationship with Olivia Lilly, who is the artistic director of Prop Theater in Chicago. And she's a BIPOC art theater maker. And she's, I don't know, 35, let's say. And I was just talking to June and my wife about how, I get so much from that relationship. And she said, well, she said, you've reached an age now that you're in your 50s. It's really important to find younger mentors in your profession who keep you thinking in an open-minded way about, what could be. So yes, what I'm saying is 2020 has been a gift to me to really get me to rethink how I work.
Yeah, what you were describing made me think about the number of conversations that have happened this past year about sort of those structures.
And do you think that it has to do with the fact that now we have time to really kind of think about some of these issues? For example, this idea of helping somebody who couldn't physically prepare a written grant and hit submit, that you actually had time to think about how you meet that person, that artist, where he, she, they are, and pivot, and then think about how you absorb that learning experience into how you go forward. I mean, it's really the gift of time in 2020.
So I do agree that it's partially the gift of time. It is also the gift of urgency.
Yeah.
That when you're there are no problems that are too small. And that we should be problem solvers in this time period and not just trying to recreate what we did last year and recreate the same thing. That every day we are doing something new. And the big lesson you'll remember when when in the beginning of this period where we were sort of imagining that, well, we're going to make a decision today, but we also know that this decision may not hold next week, or for that matter, even tomorrow, but that it's going to be constantly changing and moving.
Yeah, I think that has been a tremendously important lesson, and it's something I could see the Phoenix continuing to work this way up to a point, and that is like right now we are the board is only approving quarterly budgets, so they had an overall view of what our fiscal year might look like beginning September 1, but they're only ratifying or voting on a quarter at a time, so that as information comes in, we're able to adjust our budget every quarter through this fiscal year. And what has been a blessing for the Phoenix, well, among the other blessings I've already mentioned, for us is we're actually I think $90,000 better at this point in the fiscal year than Delia Robertson, our managing director and our finance committee of the board, had projected we would be, which is like, okay, that's great news, right? So as we go into the next quarter for the board, they can see they're like, oh, we're actually in pretty good shape, so that we could be ready to open this outdoor stage now. We're thinking more like the beginning of May rather than April. And we could be laying the groundwork for an indoor season that would resume in October of 2021. So yeah, I could see us, even when the pandemic is over, whenever that might be, is still having the board approve a preliminary annual budget, but that every quarter we adjust based on what the previous quarter's numbers tell us, so that we're able to constantly be monitoring what do we need to do to, do we need to tighten our belts this quarter? We've got this surplus, can we move it toward debt reduction? Can we, so it's been, I think really, like you mentioned earlier, our board, and this would be me speaking on their behalf, but I get the sense that they have a much clearer understanding of the annual budget of the Phoenix, and also now what the outstanding debt is from the construction of the facility. Like, those numbers now have never been clearer, I think, to any of us than they have been beginning this summer. And that has been so actually a comfort to really know what our debt is, and to really understand what we can comfortably operate in a fiscal year.
Exactly. And they have a deeper sense of what does earned income cover as part of this? And what is the value of the philanthropic sector, as opposed to looking at it sort of holistically, being able to have a deeper understanding of the impact in terms of all the income streams as well. So it has created this deeper understanding, not only of the expenses, however critical that is, because that's what we're spending,
Right.
but also what is the money that is coming in. But I always want to go back to the people's side,
Right.
and how organizations like the Phoenix have prioritized people, the staff, the artists, as part of this process, as well as always prioritizing the safety in terms of audiences and making sure that audiences continue to be engaged. And there is a part of what I've heard sometimes folks talk about, well, they need to engage the audiences so that they'll come back and spend money. No, I think that what we're doing is that we're continuing to engage audiences, because we know that the arts are a thread that is going to keep us all sane and mentally healthy and strong. And yes, it keeps you connected to the organization so that you know that the organization is still here. But part of that is the certainty that it's here for you when you're ready to come back.
So you mentioned the Restart Resilience grant that the Arts Council is making available to the arts community, that's funded by Lilly Endowment. Talk a little bit about, if you would please, Ernest, what for those people who maybe not know about these grants, what their intention, the intention is behind them, and maybe some best practices of some of the ones that have been awarded thus far, and how it's positioning us for 2021.
It's the survey data that our organizations provided that gave us a sense that we were able to provide with the funding community of what's ahead financially for arts organizations. And it wasn't about while we measured financial losses, that all falls into this sort of relief fund pool. And it didn't cover sort of operational costs for standard operations, because that's our sort of general operating support and the kinds of things that the philanthropic community has already been supporting. This was about new and unexpected COVID-19 related expenses. So what is that? Those are the things that weren't in your budget before because there was no COVID-19. Those were the things like protective safety measurements, or new physical environmental changes, such as the outdoor venue, in order to provide safer theater experiences, things that are going to make people safer so that they can engage more. And perhaps it's about access. So it is definitely about access, but perhaps it's also about figuring out how we can innovate in ways that are going to increase our access to audiences that we've never imagined before. So, for instance, 23 organizations have received these grants. This is a non-competitive grant process, so that 74 organizations are built into this model based on those survey results. Those organizations told us what their COVID-19 unexpected costs for reopening and restart would be, even though they were sort of imagining what it possibly could be is based on their scenario planning. We built a model in partnership with Lilly Endowment in that now we are providing arts organizations 18 months in order to apply for a grant that was based on the amount of cost that they said that they were going to need for that restart. It does not cover their main operating costs in terms of their ongoing program, and it doesn't cover any lost income. It is about these new things. For instance, did the Phoenix is moving forward on an outdoor performance space, a venue in the parking lot. This was not something that was imagined last year when we were all about what are we going to do inside the building. Last year, the Indianapolis Movement Arts Collective was not talking about how do we provide socially distanced dance classes and also virtual dance classes to their participants around the city, and then they can see a larger audience who were participating. That wasn't being talked about last year, but now through this program, they have funding to be able to do that. Last year, the opera was focused on how do we make sure that people are coming to the opera performances over at Butler. Now they pivoted towards how do we make sure that we are, and the director David Starkey talks about this one, so it's more in my generation, that sort of a Mr. Rogers at the opera, that you will be able to see it broadcast virtually, opera broadcast virtually into schools and into community centers and into homes, something that they weren't focused on before.
Right.
And that's the whole idea of innovation, that each of these grant applications is focused on how are you innovating, how are you protecting people, audiences, staff members, artists, and how are you creating a safety plan that is demonstrating that you're protecting people. And then how are you innovating so that there is greater equity, greater access, and that you are doing this work and it's going to be in a sustainable way. That there have been several conversations where people have asked, well, can I do this versus this? And what differentiates this versus this? I like to think of it as, is it going to be permanent of what you're doing? And is it new? Versus, is this temporary, like a Band-Aid just to get me through? Or is this something that's going to cover my lost income? Can I just move a position from, well, they were sort of my marketing director and now they're going to be my safety director? No, that's not. That is not the kind of thinking that we're talking about.
Nobody should make Bill Simmons their safety director.
No, it's so weird. We're talking about a whole systemic change so that you can focus on, there's one part of your organization to continue riding the ship in the way that it always has.
Yeah.
But this provides the opportunity to do innovative new things that are protecting the health of the organization and the people associated, which is people are always at the center of everything that we do. And also, how is that going to be sustainable and permanent moving forward? And what the Phoenix is doing is a perfect example of what is permanent, but there are also so much happening in terms of technology. That's one of the biggest trends that we're seeing in terms of these grants is how do we use technology to reach new audiences and to keep schools school students safe, teachers safe. And so that's a big part of what we're seeing. It's pretty exciting.
No, I really think what we're talking about doing with the park at the Phoenix, which is what our parking lot's going to be called, is a permanent pivot to something new and really more meaningful to the city. Not that the Phoenix Theater hasn't been meaningful to Indianapolis in its 37 going on 38-year history, but it's time to augment what we have done well, which is being a contemporary, professional contemporary theater company, um, to something that is more inclusive and more opening to more artists and therefore more audience members. I'm excited about the idea of exposing a longtime Phoenix patrons to Asante Children's Theater, to Phoenix Rising Dance Company, to Young Actors Theater, to Summer Stock Stage. Not that, we don't already have some overlap there. Comedy Sports Indianapolis is looking at dates with us next summer. IUPUI's Onyx Fest has taken a meeting. Kenyatta Dance has never had a relationship with the Phoenix in all our years, and they're looking at dates out there. And it just really feels to me like an opportunity to create a community gathering space. That Dr. Lisa Harris from Eskenazi, who's on our board, she said one of the reasons that we support the Phoenix financially, and she's why I joined the board, is because studies show that gathering places for people contributes to the mental health of your community. So having, our Trail Talks event, which is free and open to the public, and the last one we did was Women in Politics in February before the pandemic shut us down. We had women of various ages and various points on their careers, politically, opposite sides of the aisle. It was a diverse panel, and Leslie Weidenbender of IBJ moderated it all. And we had like over 100 people there. And we had like a Girl Scout troop watching women talk about women in politics. And Lisa Harris said that is why the Phoenix Theater is important to Indianapolis, is because you provide a place that people can gather and talk and see art and be with other like-minded people. And I think that's what really excites me about the park at the Phoenix idea is I'm excited about having these artists and these audiences gathering. I want to see the work. I want to be in that. That's the thing. It's like, that's kind of my litmus test now. Do I want to be in the crowd to see it? Because if I don't, why would I expect somebody to pay 10, 20, 30, $50 for these things? But all these things that I hear us talking about, they're things I want to see. And that's what excites me about 2021 is and we did get our R&R grant. So thank you so much for that. Because
such an exciting plan. I mean, it's one of the first performing arts grant applications that has come in, one of the first. And it was just very exciting in a way that you're recognizing what the challenges are in terms of an indoor space. And also not just thinking in terms of pivoting for a short term. That whole idea of creating a communal space outdoors is just something that I immediately thought when I read the proposal is, oh, well, this should have been the plan all along. That it had.
That's a very good point. That is a very good point.
But that's what this moment has been about.
Yeah.
Is sort of how do we think outside the box? And that's just using that phrase is such a trite way of expressing yourself. But it's all about innovation during this time period, and it's going to make everything better. I honestly hope that at the end of this process, we will have more donors, more audiences, more artists engaged, more artists creating new works, arts organizations sort of supporting and presenting new works at a greater level than before, new music, more diverse boards that will be far more aware of how we're actually tracking and acknowledging and welcome people of color into our spaces. And we will know that our boards are either representative of the community that we live in, or not. And then we won't just be talking about the work that we need to do in terms of equity. I was in a meeting with one of our board members talking about board diversity. And she said, and this is a white female, and she said, well, board diversity should be great in arts organizations because it's all they ever talk about is board members talk about it all the time. And then I said, no, this is the opportunity, this season is the opportunity to finally move from talking about it
Yes.
to actually building that diversity and making that commitment. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about what you guys are doing in terms of your consultants, in terms of your committee, in terms of building it into the overall structure of the organization. It's not one of those things that, oh, staff is going to do this. This is a board priority. And that is when it's going to be lasting and make a true impact.
Yeah, I was delighted when we just came up with the idea of the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Task Force, or we call it the IDEA Task Force, is we asked for volunteers, and 5 board members and 4 staff members volunteered. We are 35% people of color. We are at least one self-identifies from the LGBTQ communities. And so and it's all volunteers. And I just find that so encouraging. And that I think has been really wise because, as I said, our board is in it to win it. They're going to get us through this pandemic. And I really think we're not only, and I've been telling people, we're not only going to survive, we're actually going to thrive in 2021 because of the work that we've been doing during this.
I think that I'm hearing that over and over again from organizations that we're going to thrive. Even those who have gone into hibernation, and there are a significant number of small organizations, primarily performing arts organizations, that have just gone into hibernation. I think they're also, but those organizations are going to learn from what organizations like yourself, what Indianapolis Movement Arts Collective, Dance Kaleidoscope, and others are doing. And not being in hibernation, how they are still pivoting in order to do some sort of hybrid experience that is going to expand audiences and also retain audiences as we move forward. And so you're being an example and a leader to a lot of performing arts organizations that are following and watching and seeing, well, what is the Phoenix doing? And that's a good thing.
Oh, well, thank you, Ernest. Thank you. This has been such a meaningful conversation to me because I really do look to you and Julie as, not just colleagues, but really mentors and guides, because I've been, really gathering and listening to as many voices of those I respect, and really listening and absorbing. And I thank you for all of this because it's inspiring. And I do get the sense that you're pretty hopeful and optimistic, which then inspires me to be even more so.
It's something that we're seeing that arts organizations like yourself, theater organizations are still going to commit to these sort of virtual and hybrid expressions, but also return back to some of our core things that have been sort of traditional, but not be restricted by we're doing it because that's how we've always done it.
Yes.
And that's an incredible gift of this time period, is that we no longer have to do things because we've always done it.
But I think for those of us who have the I hate to say luxury, but we have the luxury with our board and staff and artists to rethink what we're doing and making it more impactful when we come back to it. I mean, I was really proud of the stuff we were doing right before we closed. The Phoenix Rising Dance Company, and you saw Nina Simone, High Priestess of Soul.
That was amazing.
So proud.
I'm still talking about it this fall. That was before the pandemic started. I mean, that just blew me away.
Yeah, and then we, right before our doors closed, we got in 3 of a 4-week run of Matt Smart's The Agitators about the 45-year friendship of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. And I was so proud of that production. It had Lauren Brigham, who founded Summit Performance Indianapolis, a women-focused theater company, and Michael Burke came back from Chicago to direct, and he'd gotten his undergrad at Butler, and he's just a rising star in the Chicago theater scene and now regional theater across the country. And he did such a beautiful job with it. And we're going to do that kind of work again, but we're just going to maybe not do quite as much of it. And the programming we build around it, we're going to simplify and just really focus on, if we're going to do a trail talk, how does it complement what's on the stage, making sure the gallery matches back up again with what's going on the stage. And we were getting back to that, but it was the volume we were trying to pump out with such a tiny staff and not really having the earned income capacities to sustain it when we need the contributed income, a portion of that, to go toward retiring the debt. Like, we needed to find a healthier balance, and we're finding it. And I'm really excited about what's coming for all of us in 2021. And it inspires me to feel your hope and optimism. It really does, Ernest.
Well, our hope and optimism is fueled by the creative ideas that we're seeing from folks like you. So thank you for what you're doing, because you're not just doing it for the Phoenix Theater, you're doing it for the sector, you're doing it for the city, because all that you're doing is going to help downtown. It's going to help the city. And yes, it's a mental health situation. It's an economic impact situation. It's about vitality, and we want a thriving city, and we need to make sure that institutions like the Phoenix are there and thriving and making the huge impact that we already knew that the Phoenix could do this, and we already knew that all of these arts organizations could do more. But now we've had the time to pause and think, oh yeah, we can do it. We just were too busy thinking about doing what we did yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a good season.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this, Ernest. It has been a delight. This feels like an early, I celebrate Christmas, so I feel like it's an early Christmas present for me. I don't know when this will air. This might air in 2021. But, yeah, I wish you and your husband and the Arts Council staff a really happy holiday.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll tell everybody I'll be talking to Julie in just a short while, so I'll tell her that you sent her well wishes, and I know that she's sending the same back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend. Be well and be safe, and hopefully I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.